Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Performance Cafe. It is great to have you here, and I'm in a particularly good mood because the seasons are changing and it's always a great time for me. And I thought, well, if the seasons are changing and we're all getting more invigorated and feeling the change ourselves, I thought it would be a great time for us to start talking about navigating change for team success. So sort of in our businesses and in our organizations. And the first thing that sort of came to mind for me was understanding why change is difficult. And I really see this from the perspective of the senior management teams in organizations who often are the ones that have to decide on and drive these changes from a strategic perspective. And then, on the other hand, you've got this person who is just a single team member. Maybe they're young, maybe they're new, feeling a bit uncertain. And then there's this big clash because the change is needed. It's supposedly a good thing. Why aren't you as excited to change as we are? And I think there are a couple of things that come into play that sometimes when we do change management, we overlook because we're really good at managing the task of change. I'm not quite sure if we're always that great at managing the people component of it. So today, I want us to take a look at what are some of those challenges and how can we approach them more positively so that when we start talking about change, we don't get so much pushback from people. And I think the first thing to understand is that, unfortunately, as a coach, I see way too much of this, is that even when people are in a bad situation, they'd rather stay in the bad situation than change. The reason for this is that any change to the status quo can feel quite threatening. So when one takes a look at change in organization, not only is that change threatening, but also often changes from the top down can be very task-driven, very goal-orientated, but not very people-y. So what we're talking about here is actually the loss of control and how people accept that, take to that, how it triggers them, right? So the first thing that we often want to talk about is what is going to change. And here we've got a couple of aspects to look at. Firstly, what is going to change is not just the actual change. We are implementing system B, we are buying company X, but it's the why. It's the understanding of the purpose and the importance of it, how it affects, how it's advantageous to our business, and that what is that ripple effect through to our people. And so, I love Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, where he starts with why. He starts with what's the purpose of this thing? So we can take a look at a change, understand that it represents some form of pain because we have to change. But if we don't understand the purpose and what's good about it, then it all just feels like overwhelming and too much. And so I think that there's certainly place for clear communication, not only about what we're doing, how we're going to do it, but also why we're going to do it. And as he would say, we should start with the why. The next part is really interesting because the next question is, how will this impact me? And so often people will go, and I ironically yesterday spoke to a client who said to me, I just stormed out of a meeting because I was so overwhelmed. And I said to her, what happened? She said to me, we were told that from the beginning of next month, there's going to be a change, and the change is answering all the problems that we've had about why our work progresses very slowly. And they're putting these systems and these processes into place to support us. I said to her, well, why were you upset? And she said to me, because they said we have to clear our backlogged work by the beginning of the next month. She says, we've not been able to do that for months. And they're not really helping us with that. So what was happening is she had a problem, her team had a problem. The problem was being addressed. And yet, what was overlooked was the fact that the problem that got them there, they're not solving that. They're just putting a new rule for the new work. And so I think it's important to understand how this impacts people, and specifically that when they see that impact to themselves, that we have to explain and communicate more than just change that's going to happen. We must understand the nuts and bolts behind emotions. Why are people being triggered? Why are they not accepting the change? Where do they think the sticking points are going to occur? And once we've got that, and there's really more than enough space to air those emotions. In changes that are well planned, we actually expect this to happen. Ironically, I said to her, well, were you the only person in the team that was upset? And she said to me, yes, everyone else was very enthusiastic, but everyone has the same backlog. And so we could take a look at that and why that triggered her. And then we actually realized, ironically, and it's only because of past experience I've had in working with a variety of cultures, that the individuals in those cultures are not prone to talk up when they feel discomfort because it's considered impolite, it's considered rude, it's considered going against. And so we could talk about that and talk about her emotions. And when she left, we were able to say, okay, so this is the parts that concern you. Go and sit down and have a discussion with someone. That part, that was emotional. What do we do about how do you deal with that on your own? Right? Next up, will I be able to give input? So part of, I think, organizational change, often the sense that the larger the organization, the more the individual team member lacks any form of control, input, they're not able to shape the result or, give their opinion. And I think specifically where we see that play out is environments where the change is managed at one level, but actually the output is at entirely a different level. So the people who are designing the change, working for the change, actually don't know what it takes to do it day to day. And so I think that's an important aspect to consider as well. Next up, what are the mechanisms available if people don't like the change? And they're not going to like the change. So we're not going to put a mechanism in place and hope that no one gives us any feedback or uses the feedback mechanism. We can be open to that. Why? Because when we listen to where people don't like the change, where people are not liking the system, whatever it is, while we're in the change management process, we often have people around us who can help us augment, assuage, whatever, to make sure that we make this as user-friendly and as functional for the people who are going to use it. And then last but not least, I think the important question is, who is in control of the change? And is this person or team's focus only on the task or on the people too? You see, it's very different when we get told, oh, Bob's running the change, and we go, well, we've been through 3 changes with Bob, so we know he'll get us through it safely, and he's going to listen when we've got a concern, versus, oh, it's being run by head office. And head office, you might not listen. We don't know their head office. We don't have an emotional connection to them. They've never done our job. Now, nothing against head offices, but you understand how that disconnect makes people feel like there might be more of a task focus than a person focus. And I think that for me, 90% of change management is about this control and about empowering people, firstly, to understand what's happening, how's it going to happen, why is it happening, how we take into account how it's going to make them feel, what is going to be their part around the input about making this happen, how they're going to talk to us about when the system doesn't work, when the change doesn't work, when things aren't going to plan. And then also, who's that team that's going to, or that person that's going to manage this, and how do we set it up so that that person is part of all that communication, all of that feedback, and able to integrate all this information that's being received on the fly. I hope that you have found these couple of questions interesting. And then next week, we'll be continuing looking at who are the role players in change and how do we manage them. But until then, if you've liked this, please go to our website, performforward.com, where you will find this video posted not only as a blog, but with a link to the video as well. And then I look forward to seeing you next time at the next Performance Cafe.